So I'm going to read the quote that's in this photo right now so we can jump off from the quote into a conversation. We live here now at the intersection of physical and virtual worlds. Our collective well-being spans both. I read this quote from an organization called Metaversal Wellbeing, and they really posit the idea that there's a very thin membrane between everything right now. How we spend time digitally is how we spend all our time mostly these days. And it can be from binge watching to working. And the idea of digital burnout is really scary. And we want to talk with you and with Kelly about what does it look like, first of all, to be digitally unwell before we talk about wellness. We've been having these conversations about digital wellness, about ethical tech, about the worlds we're creating, and how much responsibility we have to hold each other accountable. But I really want to dig in today about identifying if, in fact, we have a problem, and then where do we go from there. So, Kelly, thank you for being here. And I know I've heard your voice before here on Swell already. It's great to have you. And I know we're in a world of loneliness. The Surgeon General said there's an epidemic, and that sort of defends sometimes the idea of people going online to spend time. And we are very aware and concerned and partnering with lots of organizations as communities here, saying that we love talking to each other here, but within reason, we know that we need to get out and see the sky and be with our family. So there's one of the things I love about Metaversal Wellbeing is that you guys are basically saying, let's not look at this idea of restriction. Let's not say you're going to limit screen time or you're going to go on a detox. That's not really addressing the issues that you guys want to address. We are in a time of overwhelm for sure, but we're in a time of transition, and ultimately we are going to be living in a more digital world. So if we can figure it out now from science and not from just gut, like let's not do old school stuff. Let's look at the science behind this and figure out how to be better at our behavior and our habits. I think we can get somewhere. But let's start with, what does it mean to be unwell in the metaverse? And can you define unwell, and can you define the metaverse for people? Because I think some people think it's a place you can enter into and then leave. But I think the world is now truly the Internet of Things. So we are always in some kind of verse. But can you define unwellness for us so we can start from the place of problem? Thank you so much for being here.
Hi, Deborah. Thank you so much for inviting me to speak on this. You've really captured the heart of our mission so well in your intro, and there's so much to dive into. But in the interest of time, I'm going to focus on answering the two main questions you've teed up for me here. So first, what is the metaverse? That's a great place to start. At Metaversal Wellbeing, we like to think of the metaverse as a time instead of a place. It's the unfolding present as the line between the physical and virtual worlds blurs almost completely. We could also think about it as a tipping point when digital experiences start to carry equal, if not more, value than physical ones. So for better or for worse, we started Metaversal Wellbeing, did the branding, bought the domain, all before Zuckerberg announced Meta, actually. So our definition includes his interpretation, avatars participating in a full-on virtual reality, but it also encompasses the many steps that come before that. We're really speaking to the parts of our lives and selves that are already inseparable from the internet. And that's really the whole premise of this project. It's acknowledging that for most of us, our lives are already completely intertwined with the internet. So how can we extend our definition of and our approach to well-being to include our time online? Because right now, it often feels as though well-being is something separate from the internet, like it's something we can only attend to by signing off. And to be clear, we are all for setting healthy boundaries with our devices, and our time offline is increasingly precious. But at the same time, how can we also learn how to live well online? How should we be conducting ourselves when we are on these devices? So your second question is really interesting because I've been asked so many times, what is digital well-being? But I love the idea of backing into it and thinking about what it means to be digitally unwell. Now, I can share my perspective on this, but I do want to call out that I have a collaborator on this project. Her name is Jocelyn Brewer, and she's a cyber psychologist based in Sydney. So down the line, I'd love her to weigh in on how she'd define this from a scientific standpoint. But to me, being digitally unwell is when your time online and your digital habits stunt healthy development, positive action, and or authentic happiness. So just like with physical ailments, this can show up in all sorts of different ways. It's when the media you consume and the interactions you have online leave you overwhelmed, apathetic, radicalized, or immobilized. It's when your time online distorts your worldview or weakens your relationships with yourself or those around you. Really, to sum it up, it's when your time online diminishes your overall quality of life. And we believe there's a lot of different things that can contribute to this that have nothing to do with the amount of time you spend online, but rather the quality of the things you consume on there. That's our main critique of digital detoxing, because what's the point of detoxing if you're just going to binge on junk the second you sign back on? So instead of focusing on how much, we're more concerned with the what and the why behind our digital habits. And that why is so critical when assessing what healthy internet behavior looks like. But it's also important to point out that healthy internet behavior can look drastically different person to person.
Kelly, thank you so much for these clarifications. I want to ask about the frustration. I think a lot of committed digital wellness people might have around reaching those who really need this conversation most. The whole preaching to the converted idea. How do we ripple out this message? And I want to start by specifically asking you about the protocol of your program, because you've defined it so well. I know it's like I'm really impressed with how scientific and methodical your program is. It's not just language that's generic. It really invites us to take part in something that seems really amazing. Can you talk about outreach and how is that going, and what's your goals around reaching people who are right now online to be reached, obviously, because they're probably online all the time. But how do we find them, and how do we find those who love them? What does that look like?
Hey, Deborah, I love this topic, and I loved being a fly on the wall and listening to you and Kelly go into the replies on this more in depth. I think that, it's going to be impossible to get to the core of all of this in one podcast. So I hope this is something that continues to progress as the metaverse continues to progress. And on the subject of the metaverse, I also love how the both of you have just defined the metaverse as something that we're already in, as opposed to something that we need to prepare for that's off in the distant future. Because I agree, I don't think we need to be represented by an avatar to be able to have these discussions that are really important. And so I think that there's so many things that converge together to define whether we are in a place of digital wellness or not. And I think it's very subjective to the person, how much stimulation we are capable of taking in at this point in time. So for me, I do have to be careful with my ADHD, like the number of conversations that I engage in, or the number of things that I post, because I do need to be able to get back to my life outside of the digital world, and I don't always switch task too well, and I don't always multitask too well. So, but for other people, they have better filters, and they can, do it throughout the day, and they can be more consistently in the digital world than I am. But it also, too, I think it's that in relation to how much stimulation that you are receiving out in the environment. And for me, there's times where I do need to be more out there with people. And so I do need to be careful in my downtime what I'm doing with it and how much I'm engaging with other people, because I need that recharging time to myself. And so that's another factor too, and that changes depending on where you're at in life and what you're going through and what you're dealing with. And so I think, politics is a good one. Like I do like to talk politics, and I like a good discussion, and sometimes it'll turn into a debate. But I have to be cyclical with politics. It can't be all year round, because I do get to the point where I've had enough, and if the conversation is turning or is starting to turn predominantly negative, like it had the tendency to do after Trump, then I just can't be out there with politics all year round. But there's definitely people that can, and I envy them. Different topics like psychology and things like that I can do all year round. But that being said, I have a book laying on my shelf, on my desk right now on parenting, and it's a good book, and I want to read it, but I can't. I don't have the tolerance for any more parenting books, and that's not even digital. That's just, I'm done with the topic. And so that's where I think Swell is great, is that post-COVID, I was in this mode of taking in information, whether it's reading news, reading books, and there wasn't as much grappling with it. Although Facebook allows you an outlet, it's in writing, and there's limitations with that. So it's been really, I think, Swell for me as of right now. I'm psychologically well in this space. But that being said, like, I still really can't do any social media on weekends, because that's when my family's home, when my kids are home, and my husband's home. And I do need to be focused on them, and I don't transition real well. So the weekends are kind of social media free for me personally, but for other people, that might be their high time. So it's a great discussion, and I hope it continues to evolve, because there's so many facets to it, and it's so important. Thanks so much.
Hey, Renee, thanks for your comments. I think what you talk about with regard to stimulation is a very interesting subset of this, and I hope that we can talk about this with Kelly, because stimulation is really good. I think it sparks us. It keeps the lights on in our minds, and we've associated so much of our connection to the digital world with that stimulation, information, creativity, engagement, all that yummy stuff. But I'm just wondering about if we're fooling ourselves to the extent that stimulation is actually sort of crowding up space that needs to be left for something else besides all that stuff. And I think that's where I'm curious about the science behind, like, what is too much, and how do we know that? Because a lot of us just don't know. So I look forward to more from this conversation, and we'll see what pops. But thanks for this so much. And you're right, it's really hard to capture this, but we're at the beginning of a long journey, I think, of making people aware and getting them into that self-monitoring space where they can really say, okay, what do I need to do now?
Hi, Deborah. Thanks for that heads up about the mic on my last response to this thread. All I really wanted to say was that I think that the difference between being digitally well and being digitally unwell is understanding where it is that our digital practices are extending and expanding, or natural capacities and giving us access to things that we wouldn't otherwise have access to, creating time for us instead of sucking up our time, and figuring out where our digital practices are actually constraining us, limiting our ability to act in the world, limiting our capacity to be fully human. And I had a really quick example of this, and you know that I'm of a generation where we used to navigate with maps and coordinates and giving directions to each other, and with just being geographically aware of our surroundings, because we didn't have Google Maps and computers that would tell us to turn left here and turn right there. And not very long ago, I had a student, a very capable young person, who had lost their phone and were going to be without it for a short period of time, and actually had to get down to the phone store where they had been before, and they had no idea actually where the phone store was, geographically speaking, no idea how to get themselves there, and no idea how to figure this out. So we were chatting, and I looked up the address on my phone because I wasn't familiar with this place, and I said, okay, so you just have to go west till you reach this street and then turn left. And the student said, well, which way is west? And we actually live in a city where it's very, very easy to figure out where north, south, east, and west are, because we have two mountain ranges running north-south down either side of the city. We have the big one, which is on the east, and the little one, which is on the west. And if you can figure out that, you ought to be able to figure out the west. And the other thing that the student had never really noticed is the way that the grid system, the numbering system of streets works here. And all of this because this digital native had actually never had to do wayfinding. And I think that there are a lot of young people who are addressing this, who are, actively seeking out ways to know where they are in space and time, etc. But this was just an example of somebody who I think was and felt and was helpless without the technology that they carried in their pocket. And this feels to me like a kind of digital unwellness, that if your technology fails, you literally cannot function in physical reality. All that said, I'm feeling a little bit like the little old lady who is shouting at young people, "Get off my lawn, get off my lawn." But what I really mean is, please don't forget that you live in the world.
Hey, Catherine, I had to reply to this because, first of all, you're so spot on about this, and you're not a little old lady, by the way. I mean, you're little, but you're not a little old lady. Okay. The idea of knowing your world without a device in your hand is something that really resonates with me, and a great topic. How do we understand our world without the phone, without devices, without the internet? Can we drop into that once a day or once a week or something? Like, that's a great idea. Like trying to find something without researching it, like just figuring other ways, asking people ideas. What's a great restaurant around here? We go to Google. What if you walked up to your neighbor and said, what restaurant have you been to lately? Like, unplugging deliberately. That stuff is yummy. And that's exactly what you two had to do to find this place. It sounds so basic, but it's so extraordinary. Thank you.
Hi, Deborah. It's a great question. So as far as outreach and getting this message out to the mainstream goes, I don't have a definite answer, but we do have some theories which are embedded in our work. So first and foremost, my perspective is informed by my background in art theory, media theory, and brand strategy. Oftentimes, I feel like people think of aesthetics and brandings as frivolous, nice-to-haves, but I have seen the really profound power they hold. My personal theory is that to reach a mass audience, the digital well-being space needs to feel more expressive and enticing. Just a side note, I'm going to be talking a lot about food on here, and that's because we feel food is a very powerful metaphor to help us understand the impact of everything we consume online. In the very simplest of terms, we like to say media shapes our minds, much like food shapes our bodies. So I think a lot about the way the natural food industry has rebranded since, let's say, the 1970s. It's not just about the muted granola cues anymore. Healthy food brands today look vibrant and even whimsical, and most importantly, appetizing. So we want to create a really intriguing and inviting brand experience to attract people, especially younger people, who might otherwise glaze over the more corporate or subdued aesthetics that we typically associate with educational organizations. Another thing we believe will help amplify this message is collaboration and cross-disciplinary approaches. Collaboration is at the heart of metaversal well-being. I'm a strategist based in New York who teamed up with a cyber psychologist based in Sydney. We've never actually met in person, but we've been working closely together for over 2 years now. And to me, that's the internet at its best, bringing people together for a collective cause. But what I really like about this so much is that different things resonate with different people. You want the science side, you can talk to my partner, Jocelyn. If you want to think about this from a more cultural or media theory perspective, I can speak to that. But our ultimate goal is for metaversal well-being to become a collective resource. So yes, we have a lot of our own thinking and tools to share, but we're equally as excited to showcase other people's perspectives. We want nutritionists to weigh in on this, people in the fitness world, yogis, programmers, teachers, artists. The way we live online impacts every single person in every single industry every single day. There is no one problem, so there is no one solution. That's why we want to curate an extremely diverse collection of voices to weigh in on this. So if you or anyone listening wants to contribute, please feel free to reach out to me. And lastly, I really think it all comes down to patience. Here again, I want to go back to the food industry. There was a time when it was just, totally crunchy hippies that advocated for natural food. And it took literally decades. But today, I think we can officially say that the desire for unadulterated, real food has reached the mainstream. But it all started with a small group of evangelists. Does that mean everyone, including myself, is eating healthy whole foods all the time? Definitely not. But the awareness has trickled down over time. The digital wellness space is incredibly new. The internet is incredibly new. Johann Hari has that famous quote, the internet is only 10,000 days old. And while it's closer to 13,000 days now, that's nothing. We need to give ourselves a little grace. We're still learning. So truth be told, it's been slow moving for us. We don't have a ton of social followers yet, and sometimes that makes me feel self-conscious or frustrated, but that's another trick of the internet, to make you feel like everyone is doing things faster and better than you. That's an illusion. When you're building things with substance and integrity, it takes time. So this movement will take the time that it takes, and I'm okay with that.
Hey, Kelly, thank you for first acknowledging how the internet does trick us into thinking things that are big and fast are the winners. It's not that way at all. And we're proving that time and time again in our work. Secondly, using the analogy of food and the food industry, or the parallel, is really powerful. And I think it's a really great one to hold light onto, because we have to believe that over time the goodness rises, and people from all sectors are clamoring for solutions. And I think I like about the combination you speak of is the science and the branding and the art and the just the rigor of repetitive testing to see what messages actually work. It's important to know branding. It's our responsibility as advocates, as activists, to know what the power of branding. I also feel strongly about the power of invitation, because people have to feel welcome to feel confused or uncertain. And so many people in different sectors around this world are looking for solutions. And if there's a place where they can go, where they feel welcome and they feel in community, I think that's critical. And it feels like that's the kind of sort of brain trust you're building, which is, everybody, if you have a solution, if something's worked in this town or in this library or in this university or in this, municipality, tell us, share it with us, let us know. I really do sincerely invite you to use this platform as a place for dialogue and a place for convening, whether it's in a private group or whether it's on a public feed, because we need to be listening in to the questions of others so we can say, wow, I'm glad they asked that question. I didn't even know I had that question, but I did as well. So there's all these great serendipity moments that happen when people are just iterating and talking and sharing with a certain amount of intention to get clarity about something. Because, we've invited so many people from the digital wellness space here on Swell, and I was looking at a couple of the conversations as an aggregate because I looked at the hashtags we've been using, and it really feels like there's a certain class of people who are, in this thought leadership space that feel complete empathy, which is a great characteristic in leaders. They empathize with people's frustration, fear, confusion, sadness, loss, depression, all the things that come with feeling out of control. But like you said, it's great that we have this amazing thing that you could partner with someone in Australia and have that great relationship because of the internet. So I'm super excited about the energy you bring to this effort, and I'm just happy we're having this conversation. Let's continue it.
Hi, Renee. Thank you so much for weighing in on this. And I just love how you've shared your personal approach and boundaries. And I think that you are spot on when you say that digital well-being is completely subjective. We could not agree more. So metaversal well-being has 5 core principles when it comes to building a more nourishing relationship with the internet. I'm not going to go into all of those now, but our very first principle is about honoring inner signals. Our bodies are constantly sending us messages to communicate our needs and limitations, but the vast majority of us have completely lost touch with these. The pressures and the pace of modern life have really forced us to ignore or suppress these signals so that we can just keep up or power through the day. And I also think that tech really contributes to that inclination to drown out our inner world. But the good news is we can reestablish that connection with ourselves and our inner knowing. So when you're scrolling and you start to feel super anxious or your heart starts racing, that's telling you you've reached your limit. Or when your leg falls asleep or your neck starts to hurt after you've been sitting on the couch watching TV for hours, that means something. Our minds and bodies are telling us when it's time to take a break or step away or to stretch, drink some water, take a nap. But we're just so used to brushing off these internal requests. We've come up with something called the mental hunger scale, which is available for free on our site, to help you tune in and identify what you're actually feeling whenever you start or stop using a device. It's inspired by the famous intuitive eating tool called the hunger scale, which helps you identify what you're actually feeling whenever you start or stop eating. Again, it feels like this should be obvious until you try it for yourself and realize how disconnected most of us have become from our inner voice. So again, we think the absolute best thing that you can incorporate for your digital well-being is getting curious and to start tuning into all the physical and emotional sensations that come up for you when you go online. Another principle is about maintaining variety and balance. So just like with food, people require different types and sources of information for healthy development. And these requirements vary person to person, day to day. So I just love how you talk about how there are certain seasons when you can consume news media and others that it's best for you to just stay away. It's really awesome that you're so attuned to what your personal needs are at any point in time. So when it comes to the type of information, or to your point, stimulation overall, our optimal intake and balance varies person to person, season to season, life stage to life stage, et cetera, et cetera. There's really no hard and fast rule. It's all about what's right for you. But again, it's hard to know that without tuning in and becoming mindful of how things affect you. So thank you so much for sharing. I think you've just offered us a really great example of how subjective and personal digital well-being is.
So thank you so much for that reply and all the information that was in it. I took your advice and I went to the website and downloaded your mental hunger scale. And on the website, it suggested that I make it my screensaver. So I did that. And then I sent it via text message to my kids and my nephew and their close friends. And then I also downloaded it, printed it out, and put it on my computer. And I'm going to re-swell this podcast because I really think that it's so important for everyone to hear this. But I wanted to add a comment here before I did that. And I just want to say, as a mom of 2 teenagers, I'm a subscriber to a lot of these nonprofit organizations that are out there teaching screen safety and tech wellness. And what I like about what you're doing that's different from what I see them doing is it seems like you're taking a very holistic approach to this. And where some of the other ones, in my personal experience, are very information based. And so what I mean by that is they're going to have a class on TikTok, and they want you as a parent to learn all of the ins and outs of this app so that you can stay one step ahead of your kid as they're using it. And the problem with that is I never stay one step ahead of my kids when it comes to technology. My kids are always one step ahead of me. And then as the app changes, and it always does, then I have to continue educating myself on these particular apps and how they work. And it's frustrating and it's time consuming, and I get overwhelmed. And so what I like about this is that holistic approach that you're taking. And I don't know if that's because you have a cyber psychologist on board, but I'm also fascinated by that and looking forward to hearing her perspective as you continue to grow and expand and get those followers that you deserve. But I also hope that this is something that becomes a regular topic on here, because the metaverse is expanding so drastically, and so our understanding of what mental wellness is in relation to that will have to expand and grow at the same pace. And so I look forward to these discussions continuing on a regular basis. And thank you so much for your work.
I really can't thank you enough for downloading and passing along the mental hunger scale. And you've really hit the nail on the head with what we're trying to do here, which is carve out a more holistic and intuitive approach to the internet at large, as opposed to trying to tackle, or as you said, stay one step ahead of specific platforms or devices. That's something we've both also really felt is missing from the digital well-being space. Like you said, the digital world is just so expansive and it's evolving so quickly. It feels impossible to just isolate and address each of these touch points individually. So I mentioned before that our work really builds on 5 elemental principles, which are all tech agnostic. They apply just as much to your phone as they do to social media, as they do to news media or Netflix or even now AI. And what I find so exciting and empowering about approaching digital well-being in this way is that it really shines a light on the immense power and understanding within each of us. I actually get chills when I think about this. You know, technology and the internet just feel so incredibly sophisticated and complex. It's really easy to feel like we as humans are just no match and that we're completely at their mercy. But that's not true. There are generations and generations of hard-earned wisdom coursing through each of us that can be applied here. Every one of our principles applies just as equally to food as it does to beauty products, as it does to technology or anything else we create and consume. We've learned these lessons before. We know this stuff. We know that quality matters, that building trust matters, that listening to our inner voice matters. So yes, of course, there are certain features that can help us manage our interactions on specific devices or platforms. And there's, apps that can help us set boundaries. But beneath all of that is time-tested wisdom that can guide us online. And that's what we're trying to connect people with. So nothing that we're saying here is actually so new or groundbreaking. It's just a way of seeing and being that is rarely applied to the internet or technology. And that's what's so radical. So thank you again so much for spreading this message, which is really that these complex and oppressive technologies do not eclipse deeper forms of knowing. Hi, Catherine. So appreciate you weighing in on this. And when I listened to your recording and the story about your student who couldn't navigate without their phone, it really made me think about how crucial the education piece is in all of this. So we are huge advocates for digital and media literacy being taught in schools. And at some point, we'd actually love to help design a curriculum to help people approach digital well-being in a more holistic and intuitive way. But you've really made me also think that there's another complementary component to this, and that has to do with real life skills. I think about the Boy and the Girl Scouts or those survivalist or outward bound programs that teach young people the wilderness skills that we lost touch with as we moved further into urban and industrialized environments. And I think what you're bringing up really evidences the need to evolve or build off these programs to include the skills that are being lost as we move further into virtual environments. In many ways, the physical world at large is becoming a new wilderness. So thank you so much for such a thought-provoking commentary. I think this is something that we're definitely going to sit with and will show up in our work in the future.